major contributor to my study that in the last decade, I almost said 2 decades, but the last decade, I've been overwhelmed where things connect. An example is Revelation 12. I never thought about a literal, because there's symbolism in Revelation, but I never dreamed that there was literally the possibility of the constellations in one day fulfilling the description in Revelation 12. And when I saw the first animation, it's just wow, that's pretty big. So that's why sometimes people might feel like they get a little bit bored. No, you got to see where it connects. You got people today who teach multiple positions on the rapture. There are major denominations who deny the rapture totally. Don't even believe there will be one. And got some weird views and ideas about the dominion dwelling. They kind of want to symbolically describe away the millennium, the reign of Christ, and jump on into heaven, the new heaven, new earth. But it's how we connect these points in prophecy. Now, there's another consideration you have to keep in the back of your mind. They're major and minor prophecies. You got major prophecies that are vital. That's got to be. Just got to happen. Because it is the heart of who he is and the fulfillment of who he is. And for example, his crucifixion was an Old Testament prophecy that's a major. His burial, his resurrection, those are all major. Now, when you look at the 10 toes and knowing the different countries and the 7 nations that we'll refer to again tonight, that's not major like the doctrines that we have in our faith. And to say we got the right name for the right country, I don't know that that's relevant. We can see what's happening around us, and I believe then we'll have a pretty good idea of how it's going to happen, and we can be looking up, prepared. All right, we're a little bit over. Welcome anybody who's joined us by way of the web. We got a lot of ground to try to cover. I tried to post an outline earlier this morning. It's what I thought we might do, but little did I know we'd have a major earthquake in Mexico City. And then they had some shaking in a couple other places in the Midwest and on the West Coast, but not of the magnitude. Did anyone give numbers on the Mexico City? 7-1.
99. I'm always late, but I had DirecTV on my radio in the car, and just as I pulled in, it said 99.
99 deaths. Okay, I was talking about magnitude.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The size of the quake. Yeah, I did. Last I heard it was 42. So 7-1's big. That's a big quake. And I did say, I think the first thing I saw, I was walking out the house and Fox posted, it looked like an apartment house, multi-story, maybe 10, 12 floors, and it just collapsed. And they didn't even know why it collapsed at first. When they first did the reel, they didn't say earthquake, and then later when I was driving here. So apparently somebody must have had a cell phone. I don't know why. I don't know why they were videoing, this apartment house, and then all of a sudden, it falls. And so that's a sign. We're going to talk about those a little bit tonight, because these are, again, connection points. There's some things that are pretty basic, and these are things we got to try to put together. You getting ready to throw that thing upside the wall? You got it? Okay. Listen, those things hate me. Sunday morning. Oh, I had a good morning. Got up, felt good, did all my stuff, and I got ready to email it, and I lost it. It just went away. And so then for 15 more minutes, I tried to, find it, and then finally had to go back and I had a part of it on a different location, so I didn't lose it. But I knew Sunday was a day that was going to be a good day because I met the devil early on. I said, well, you don't want me to do this because we're going to fix it, and got that done. Yes, Joe?
With Mexico, maybe Rocket Man sent something over when you were
Rocket Man, I believe, is going to get on the receiving end and not the sending end. I'll tell you what it was. I was proud to be an American today. Absolutely. It doesn't matter who delivers the speech, but I was proud to be an American in the speech. I learned in the Army, and this was in preparation for Vietnam, and all the instructors we had to come in, and they kept repeatedly saying, many parts of the world only respect strength. And if you show weakness, you have incited them. They'll fight harder, but they respect strength. And we have had a decade or so of a lack of show of strength. And if we're afraid to do something, that's the best news the enemy ever hears. And it's almost like, and it may go back to Vietnam. Afghanistan was a terrible experience, and we weren't prepared. I don't think the advisors that were in Bush's administration, nor post-advisors, even the Russians miscalculated Afghanistan.
You know who one of them advisor was? Mueller.
Oh, yeah, well, it could have been. But the thing here is, you got to know, these are tribal people. They don't know statesmanship. And they have their clans. And that's their rule of law. That's who they are. Now, tragically, they were militant Muslims who got in there and took advantage of it. And I think that there were those, I call them the good boys. No, I can't say that. The college boys. They're the frat brothers who got a position of authority in an administration, and they sit around the table and they do a little, brain twisting, and they throw out ideas and say, well, if we do this, they'll like it, and we can buy their friendship and whatever. The only gain we ever made over there and in Iraq was that we bought. We paid we made them rich people. Because we kept putting the ante in until they said to their boys, okay, y'all go fight with the Americans. And then we had the surge, and it began to work. But up until then. Now, most of you have lived in neighborhoods long enough to know that in the final analysis, you defend your own turf. And if somebody comes into town and say, hey, these strange people coming here, they're going to capture your children, rape your daughters, and imprison you. And that population's, Afghanistan's almost totally illiterate, except for those that have control. So you get set up in these things, but then I think we're seeing the fulfillment of the end times in front of us. I want to talk to you a little bit about, we started something Sunday, and I don't have time to do the whole thing. I have previously, and believe it or not, in ABI sessions, had things so simple that we could sit and spend the entire session watching a single video. And we've done that with numerous videos. And I think those are great teaching tools. Today we've got so many things that either need a comment or to kind of figure out where they connect. How could this be? That to do it all, it's like trying to move a mountain with a spoon. But there's a set of videos that we have, and they're on the table. We're going to take a little break tonight and give you a chance to look at the book table. And then we're going to do a little better job promoting. I hope to get that done before the semester's over. I think when I leave you on Tuesday that my week is going to be such that I can get some things done in the area of promotion, and I'm depending heavily on that program and that iPad. But that doesn't always work that way. This is Agenda 2. You really need to see. How many have seen this either on public TV, YouTube, but Agenda? All right, this is Agenda 2. I think I did show the whole one here. Agenda 1, when I found it, we took a Sunday night. It was when I had gone to Texas to the board meeting with Frontier, and we did it on a Sunday night. If you've not seen Agenda 1, you need to see it. It may be on YouTube. If not, we got some copies. Yes, ma'am. Agenda? Okay. Now, you can get it on YouTube. We talked about the age of deception Sunday. I don't know. We think about connecting a major link, how it fits. We know just by the names in the Bible for Satan that it's all about deception. We know enough just looking around us in life to know it's about deception. There's not an addict of alcohol, drugs, pornography, or anything that wasn't lured in by deception. I know I shouldn't do this, but I want to. You'll like it. Anytime the devil tells you you like something, we better run, because he ain't lying. We'll like it so much, whether it's drugs, alcohol, or the other stuff, that we'll pay any price to keep it unless we get deliverance. And if you know anyone who is an addict, there's no man who can live half in, half out. Either he will be or he won't be. Now, he may start what they call casual users, maybe. But in time, it'll catch him. And then he's all in. And I used to think years ago, I went to New York on senior trip. And they took us on a tour of New York. And when they did, and we just country people from Florence County. And I'm looking at the high rises. Then I looked down here, I saw all these people laying in the street. Saw one man laying in the street, laying in his own vomit. People walking by him. And then the tour guide who was hosting the tour made the comment about this is where Skid Row is for us. And he said, some of these people sleep. And he pointed at one man in an alley who was sleeping in a cardboard box. And at that time, there may have been some drugs, but primarily it was alcohol. And so people pay a price because they like it. Now, follow me for a moment. What do we expose our kids to? What are our grandkids exposed to? Almost from the cradle. We're handing out condoms at school. We have sex ed classes that take the premise we know you're going to do it. And we want to teach you about protection. And now you got that Vanity Fair crowd teaching young girls, I don't know who watches this stream, but teaching them how to have all manners of sex geared to teenagers. And there's not an uproar. And if someone says something, we're labeled as being illiterate, ignorant, narrow, bigoted. And I guess the best term I've ever had given to me is to call me a redneck, because I wear that badge with honor. If the redneck is what they define the redneck as, count me in. Now follow me for a moment. It's all about deception. You can see that. Our government is dominated with it. An agenda exposes it. And the congressman, Bowers, that did it, he and his family did it. I'm talking about a mom and pop operation. I mean, they did that documentary, won an award for it. Such an outstanding job that they did. It all started because when he was in college, he and his wife heard of a meeting that was being held by the Communist Party, and he goes to it, I think at Berkeley. He was on the West Coast. And he goes kind of, curious, And he thinks he's going to go in, and this was 30 years ago or so. He's in college. He's grown and got kids now. He was expecting to see a bunch of hippies with a socialist agenda. And he said to his dismay, the room was full of $1,000 suit men, old people. And they began to promote the 10-point agenda that the Communist Party established back in the 20s or 30s, almost 100 years ago, and what they wanted to capture. And they've succeeded. Media was one of the main ones. The church and the mainline denominations are so influenced by money men like George Soros, who finances these young preachers that are popular to write books, and he shapes the content of the books. And I wondered about that. How can that be? I'm a little old preacher in a town who gets a little exposure, and next thing you know, he's at the top, and then he's writing these books, and they get promoted by, Rupert Murdoch at Fox News. But then I find out what they own. He owned Zondervan. Zondervan was a reliable Bible publisher. And now they're owned by News Corp. And they focus group all their stuff. And especially the gender-neutral NIV version. They did it 10 years ago. And in their focus group, they found that there was an audience for a gender-neutral Bible. And now they're saying that's the only one they're going to produce. And see, my problem is some of the early versions, there was a debate over some of the interpretations they put on words. But my problem is if I'm carrying an NIV, young person in the church or a brand new Christian sees I got an NIV, they go down to Lifeway and they won't buy an NIV. If you buy a new NIV, it's gender neutral. And that's how it works. See, Satan's pretty crafty, isn't he? So I wanted to mention this to you, and I brought my laptop to show you. I'm going to show you a few minutes. This is part B. This is the second one, and I think it's connected to where we can make this happen without having major things go wrong. But yeah, it's already up. You like our green screen, don't you? That is what the lightning did to us. And I'm not sure where this is going to start. And it's loading. It didn't start where I needed it to start. Let me.
Because I'm willing to give up what I've asked for totally for just a bit of it.
I want to go back to the beginning, because those of you who have seen the first edition and not this one, and I don't think these videos are much, maybe $10 or whatever. And this could be on YouTube too. This is the new one, or the newest one.
I grew up in Cuba, and I never thought that Cuba would become a communist country. Many people at that time warned Cuba that what was going on was a communist takeover. But we say, no, that won't happen here. No one even dreamed that. And I see the same thing repeating here in the United States now. And I feel very uncomfortable about it, because I know what is the end of it. And I know that after a while, there will be absolutely nothing that the American people will be able to do. And they will lose everything they own, everything they know. And don't even think that you will be even safe inside your own house, because you won't be. They will come and get you wherever you are.
Stop it there. This crowd that we see demonstrating in St. Louis, and it started at Georgia Tech. They arrested one of the St. Louis guys. He had his body armor. He had his mask. He had his gun. He had his tear gas. And if you look at what they took off the person, and this is just one of them, you can only conclude with logic that he's a soldier. And if these things continue to build momentum, now some of us remember the riots when Watts burned and Philadelphia all but burned. When these things hit a tipping point, remember the truck driver that was severely beaten in Los Angeles, I think. Huh? And it was a savage. And those rioters were not armed like this crowd that's attacked Berkeley and these other campuses. They're trained, they're well orchestrated, and they're paid. They're paid. And when they had the riots in Charlotte last year, Nick Mintz was there. He's a city policeman in Charlotte. And the bus or buses that brought the demonstrators, both pro and con, meaning the KKK crowd and the Black Matters crowd, rode the same buses. And the media never covered it. And the police knew it. But because of the PC crowd, they couldn't talk about it. But they parked in the same area. Some rode the same bus. Now, how deceived are we? We're talking about to make a connection. You know, how will Antichrist be able to accomplish his global fulfillment? I think we're looking at it. I mean, we're almost in shape for it. And the only thing I think that really has been any kind of a barrier, and at best it's still fragile, was the election last November. But you know, in Washington, they are not happy. Whether they got an R by their name or whether they have got a D by their name, they are not happy. So there are powers that shape this. And if you want to talk about advanced prophecy, if you want to have an idea of how this works, if you want to know where all the pieces begin to come together and fit together, then if we can't connect that dot, then we're going to miss the whole thing. Because what will happen next, we're going to look beyond the fact that there's a central power, a central voice. There's the manipulator, like the puppet stage, pulling the strings that's got those dancing under them. And until we can understand that, now my next statement is the heart of it. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. It's not the man in Washington. It's the powers behind the man and men in Washington, on our college campuses, in places of local government, in municipalities and powers. Not all. You see, how many apples does it take in a bushel to spoil the whole bushel? And if you get them in the right place, you see, that's what that agenda video was about. They realized that they could not overthrow our system from the top down. They had to do it from the bottom up. They had to get judges in the right places. And as you hear this immigration debate, have you got to even wonder, have they gotten judges in the right places? And this total attack. And the word, and it puzzled me for a long time. You know what Trump was accused of was nationalism. And they kept equating Trump to Hitler. And he's still carrying that label of being a Nazi. That puzzled me. But fortunately, the History Channel has done a good job at researching certain events like World War II, certain personalities, and their great biographies on the History Channel, or you can get some of it on YouTube. And the rise of Hitler, I was spellbound to see how it happened. Now, he got control of the media because there weren't a lot of media outlets, and all he did was kill those that opposed him, and the others complied. But see, in America, that hadn't happened. How many networks? When 91% of the news that focuses on our president is negative. That's all the news sources. That's Fox, that's everybody. When 91% is negative, how effective are they when it comes to that's spelled out in these videos? Where the man says, and we got the book somewhere, Brother Earl, we didn't sell them. That little red book we had on Marxism and communism, a little handbook. I mean, you can buy them. The 10 points, you can buy them. Listen, this stuff isn't done in some secret chamber somewhere. We're not talking about the Illuminati. We're not talking about some fraternal organization that is just cloaked in secrecy. They're open. Bauer said he went to a banquet hall in a hotel and attended that conference on communism. And so, where are we? We're like bobbleheads. You know, we just bobbling along. And that's me. And my problem was, I just never dreamed it could happen in America. Has it worked?
I think it's everybody.
Good.
No,
No. Oh, thank you. We'll figure it out later if not. Okay. Now, so, look at the rest of this. But now he's talking about the fall in Cuba and how these things began to take place. Now, you also have to factor in that in Cuba, you had two classes of people. You got the have and the have-nots. Now, I don't know if you figured the math out or not, but the middle class in America is shrinking rapidly. And so that's what they have to have. See, they'll treat the haves with some elitism, and then they kill them. Every revolution. Hitler did it. Stalin killed, he signed a death warrant on 4,000 people. You've seen it on the advertisement. If you watch anything on the History Channel, that was just the Polish officers. And when they were trying to work this deal out with Poland, he's meeting with Stalin, and they're sitting there and they said, we got a list of 4,000 of our officers, and they're missing. And they asked Stalin, what do you know? He said, we killed them. He signed a death certificate on it. But for whatever reason, Hitler really is painted in a real horrible brush when Stalin and Mao killed many times more than Hitler ever did. But unless you do your research, you'll never know it. And the past administration idolized Mao. He had some on his staff. They had Mao Christmas bulbs on the tree in the White House. But whenever that was publicized and people saw it, our media said nothing. Because for the most part, they've been to the same school that has so infiltrated our nation and planted these socialistic ideas. And that's what I'm proud of Trump, President Trump today. He labels socialism what it is. And if there is a country that is going by the book with precision, it's Venezuela. And they're killing their people wholesale. So that's enough of that. Let's see a little bit of this. You're going to meet some personalities that
your arms
will help us.
Everything, and your way of life, everything. And you will be just a pawn of the estate.
You and I have the courage to say to our enemies, there is a price we will not pay. There is a point beyond which they must not advance.
And this is the point I think Americans need to comprehend. If America goes down economically, it will go down militarily. If America goes down militarily, we all go down. The free world is finished, and will be finished for a very, very long time.
Everything, practically, is in a self-destructive mode.
We're in the most critical period we've been since the Revolutionary War.
We're not alert, we're not awake with what's happening.
They would just as soon see this country on its knees and everything equalized.
That concept of collectivism, big government, is a magnet for the predator class.
The plans for all of this are to have everything globally in place by 2020.
If we're that dumb, and we allow this to happen, we deserve everything we're going to get, because we're going to get it right in the neck.
We're headed into what could be a nightmare that would make all the atrocities of the 20th century look like they were a dress rehearsal.
When people are afraid, they ask government to do more, not less.
Their theories are designed to scare the people to believe there's a crisis when there is not a crisis at all. There's no crisis.
I think we are losing more and more freedom because we are afraid.
The left wants you to believe that catastrophe is always just around the corner. And the only way to avoid it is to do exactly what they say. But this film will show everything they do is just a Trojan horse of deceit, carefully crafted to advance their real agenda of finishing America off.
We have been the main stumbling block to world communism since it first raised its ugly head.
From the promotion of Islam to the propaganda of climate change, from the deceit of Common Core to the manufactured economic crisis, and from their manipulation of the evangelical church to the unsustainable debt burden. This film will show the issues are simply being used as a smokescreen to hide the purposeful, premeditated, treasonous attacks on the foundations of our freedom.
The world religion has just purged us from being able to determine right from wrong.
You know what Alexander Solzhenitsyn said about Russia? How the communists took over Russia? He said, we forgot God.
Their stated agenda, carved in stone on a monument in Georgia and outlined in documents placed in the Ark of Hope, is to eliminate 6.5 billion people by century's end. And they will succeed. if we don't stop them.
This is not just a fight for the United States of America. This is a fight for civilization itself.
It's everything Karl Marx dreamed of before our very eyes.
I think they've pushed us over the cliff in ever since. America isn't going to fall. We are falling.
And that was the intro. Now, picture for a moment, your purpose for being here, obviously, is a Tuesday night. You've gone to some inconvenience and maybe some things that you had invitations to do you didn't do, but you've elected to come. And you've elected to come, I believe, for all the right reasons, the good reasons. Now, how do we put it in perspective? And that's why I mentioned earlier, we have to have the ability to begin to connect the dots. Everything that's in prophecy, biblical prophecy, let me say that way, at some point you can locate it on this chart. And the tricky part of prophecy is that there's dual meanings. Some young guys come along and they've not had, they hadn't had the basic training. They just jumped right into the deep end of the pool, and because of the internet and some of the instant sources, they've gained some knowledge and they've got some facts, but they don't know where to connect. And so they have a lot of things happening in the church age that really were fulfilled back in the Old Testament prophecies. And so whenever you look at it and you get a book, and there's some good books, and I meant to plug this one last week. Brother Paul gave me this book. It's entitled The Rapture, Don't Be Deceived, Pastor Billy Crone. There's so much happening today that you can't hardly find any Bible doctrine that they're not opposing points of view if you try to do any searching on the internet. And when you see it at face value, you don't know. This is a good man. And he is gifted in his literary presentations and in his arguments. So if you wanted a good book on the rapture, I'd recommend this book. In fact, we maybe can order some and have them here on the book table. But this I've not heard him personally, but other than YouTube and in his book, he's right on the mark. So tonight, I want to talk about the sign. We've got a few more days to the 23rd. One of the things that has been a bit, I won't say overwhelming, and where did I hear it today? I think it's not on that video, but it's on another one that I was looking at. And there's some good ones on YouTube, but I tell you what, you got to watch 25 to get to one, almost, and you've got so many date setters. It's really, what is the right word? Overwhelming. The dogma, and I suppose here's the difference. Most of the guys on the internet, they don't face a congregation every Sunday. I mean, they can be one and done. And then they'll pick up another issue because their audience will change, and they'll get their stuff somewhat promoted, and then they can take it off on the second round. And I'm not sure how some of these fellows are financed, but it wouldn't surprise me if there isn't some of that dirty money that's been buying preachers that might be buying that too. And so that, boy, that's a lot to go through to get to one little place, isn't it? All right, let's do a couple of things. I want to talk about the coming event on Saturday. And I've given considerable thought to it. In fact, here's a headline: a warning from God are coincidences. And I don't think anything's a coincidence. And I do believe they're warnings. And the fact that we got another hurricane breathing down on what Puerto Rico next, the Dominican Republic of Puerto Rico, and this a 5, and I forgot which island did they say that there wasn't a house left with a roof on it? The Dominic, yeah. And now we got this, and I know that things do happen. I got you can't see what I'm doing. I got to change some plugs. I just looked back on the screen and saw that. Okay, now that'll help us get to, and I can close this. And if I get to this, I might need to, but we'll do it. If I do it, I'll do it at the break. Here's the headline. You might have seen it if you get some of the prophecy journals, but this warning from God, a coincidence. It's the 4 horsemen. You see it in Revelation 6, and I don't know that we have done that study in the last several semesters, but in Revelation 6 is where actually the tribulation begins. That's where the first waves begin. The white horse rider has a bow and no arrow. He is pictured as being the Antichrist, going forth, meaning without. It's like having a gun without a bullet. That he's doing it all verbally. He's going to be a gifted orator, and people will be spellbound. He's going to be a rock star. Is the best way I know to say it. He'll have the personality, and I think the appearance of you take all your male Hollywood stars and put them in one package, and I believe that's who you'll be. The women will swoon. I couldn't understand that about Hitler. I went back and looked at some of the videos, and they'd interview the people in the Hitler Youth at the time, and the girls would just swoon over Hitler. And I was thinking, I thought Germans were smart. But he didn't have anything that I could even picture as being the mystique, of a person to captivate. But when he began to speak, then something happened. Just took over. And they talked about his personality changed. He's pretty introverted. And that's where his charisma began to pervade. I think Antichrist will do that. So he's a white horse rider, and then you got the red horse, you got the black horse, you got a pale horse, and that's death, destruction. You got 1/4 of the world's population will die. In just one wave of this, you got pestilence, epidemics, pandemics, you got all kind of stuff going on. And that's what sometimes people say, well, if I don't get raptured, I'll be here with my friends. But that won't be a comfort. That won't bring you any consolation. So and this is done in conjunction with the 23rd. This is what one of the. In fact, I got this from Prophecy Newswatch, and he's got an article that's interesting. The next slide is what we have been talking about for a couple of weeks now, and this is that constellation. And again, our video, we do hope in the near future to get some relief. Now we're having to negotiate with an insurance company, and Tommy has sent almost a threat. Before they made us, when lightning hit us in 2008, those were brand new cameras, and they made us send them to Sony to get them repaired. And it took them 6 months to repair them. And all this is robotic. There's a camera here, there's a camera back here, there's a camera over here, and there's a camera over the door here. And they control it all with a joystick. So you don't have someone walking through, with a box camera in our services in our size auditorium. That wouldn't work well. But we're going to have to replace them. And I think they've been working on Tommy told me last night twice prior to. And besides that, they're 08 to 2017. They're out of date with the new stuff anyway. But this constellation, and let me find my pointer and highlight what was discovered. I did find, and I told you I would post that, and I thought I had it in my file that I had put aside for tonight, and I looked when I got here. Maybe I can find it at the break. But you got Leo, the lion, and then you've got Virgo, and then you got at her feet is the moon, and then you got the sun. And in Revelation 12, we begin to see these things. And I did hear a mathematician that wasn't a preacher. He's involved in astronomy, and I think either he wrote the program or participated in the writing of the program that is a software that is depicting this. So what I've learned in my most recent research is that the software to produce this graphic is new. And the older software, and so you've got some ministries who do or have involvement in astronomy, but in their software they're not seeing it. So they're saying that, it doesn't happen. It's this new package that they're seeing some key elements, and here are the elements. You got the 12 stars in the crown, and that meant to look at the 12 tribes. And you see this in Revelation 12, 1 and 2. You got Virgo, that's the virgin. And then you have Jupiter, which is located here in this picture. And it's going to go up and back, and up and back, and up and back once a month for 9 months. And then it's going to kind of go around in what would be the womb area. And then Jupiter is going to go out the bottom. And so if you do two things, one, to equate Virgo with the Virgin, Jupiter with the birth of Christ, the 12 stars in the crown to identify with Israel. And as we talked about last week, and it's in that handout, if you look at the first handout that I gave you, that's page 7, that's not the right one. Let me just take the book. If you look at it, you're going to see in the commentary on the 12th chapter that it talks first about the woman, and that is to be Mary. And you see the Jupiter would be the Christ child. And then we know the red dragon is identified as Satan. And we know, and we got more evidence of that in the 13th chapter. And then you've got, on the sheets I've given you now both, because you got the whole 12th chapter, you have descriptions that you can look at, and I'm going backwards, so hold this a second. Let's see. I'm hoping, now my graphics may be different in this book than what you have. Where is my sheet I gave you last week? Does anyone not have the handout from last week? Because are they on this table over here, John? From last week? 12th on this table? Okay. Let's see. I wonder, the people wonder if I got raptured. They look up and see an empty chair. Let me do that, because I am not, here it is. I'm not proof positive. Here it is. There's a graphic that I did not notice when I was putting this together, but it's in this book. So let me fold this over here out the way and get in a more comfortable position to talk. All right. You see key symbols, first sign in heaven? Each of the breakdowns, when you go through the book, you're going to have key symbols. You're going to have what others are saying. And some of the men quoted have passed away, but the context has not. Then if you look on page 2, A Nation in Travail, here the commentators having nothing to do with the man that did that, based on just the Scripture. In the commentaries identify two things: the woman with the sun and the moon at her feet and the sun in the background, will deliver a child. And we know the child to be the promised child of David, to be the future ruler. And what is a little perplexing, and did for me for years, John wrote Revelation on the Isle of Patmos at almost age 100, at the end of the first century. And so here we have a description of the birth of Christ. Why do we have it again? And my belief is because of identification with the 12 stars, 12 tribes of Israel, that the Jews never accepted him at Bethlehem. And at age 33, they crucified him. That this is for them. You see, John didn't write Revelation the year before the crucifixion. He didn't write it in the year 31 or 2 or 3. He wrote it almost in the year 100, while exiled on the Isle of Patmos. Now, let me show you something else now. That we talk about connecting dots now. Look back with me in verse 1. A great and wondrous, what's the next word? Sign appeared in what? Heaven. Again, I'm just no country boy. But that's pretty plain to me. But literally in the past, I tended to symbolize it. When the Bible talks about a great sign, the Bible called it that. It's not me putting a title to a sermon saying the great sign. We see that in Revelation 12:1. Now, so having said that, we got to take notice of it. So once we begin to see that there's some things that are clearly stated in Scripture, then we got to look to see where do they fit. So the first thing that we have to, I believe, bounce around a little bit is, one, does it have anything to do with the birth of Christ in Bethlehem? Now you're looking at me like a mule at the gate. You don't know whether to come in or go out. But does it? If this is written in the year 100, at the end of the first century, and Jesus was born maybe in the year 0, we're talking 100 years later, we've got this description that's given to us in Revelation 12. Has it got anything to do with his birth in Bethlehem as a primary interpretation? No. No, but something else. Because we know for roughly 67 or 70 years, depending on when year he was born, that he was born. If you read the first few verses of Revelation, it speaks about Jesus. And in verse 5, 6, 7, he talks about that he will return and those who pierced him will see him. And we know that return's going to be at the Battle of Armageddon. That's going to be when he comes to set up his kingdom. So here, kind of in the middle of the description of the tribulation, chapter 6, the beginning of it, chapter 12, all of a sudden, bang, a sign appears in heaven. Who's it for? Well, I believe it's for the Jews. Now, we learned last week in Daniel 9:24, the 70 weeks of Daniel. Now, I wanted to go there tonight, but the time just, we can't put all of it in place, at the snap of the finger. But if you look at that with me for a moment, I can't tie in the date September 23rd, 2017. There's a question mark by the author of this picture. What does it mean? Well, if it's for the Jews, then we may add a secondary interpretation or view. It's also, since it's in the heavens, it's for the whole world to see God's identification with the Jews as his chosen people. Now, if it launches something, this is where they talk about the rapture, and it could. But again, I've really put a lot of thought and time and prayer over this. I don't know of anything you tie the rapture to, and I'm going to do 7 feasts in a bit so we can see where the feast days line up. It very well could be on Feast of Trumpets, but it could be the day before, the day after. It could be the night. The imminent return of Christ was to be anticipated at any day, moment. We have to get beyond God giving us a calling card telling us, now come Saturday at 12 o'clock, I'm going to rapture you. That part, if he did, we would become date worshipers. And being Baptist, we wouldn't even get ready till 11:59. And say, Lord, give me a minute. Now get my shoes on. But so I believe God just intended for us, and that's how it was taught throughout the early church fathers. In fact, one of the great examples, and we're going to do a study on the rapture as a refresher and look at the details of it, but when you read 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, in verse 13, he says, behold, I will not have you ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep. Well, the sleep, the reference to people who died. Well, why were they sorrowing? He goes on to say that you sorrow not as others who have no hope. Well, why were they sad? Paul also had already taught absent the body, present with the Lord. And many of the scholars believe it had to do with the rapture of the church. Meaning that he had preached it so fervently, and they had so looked for his return, for the rapture, I'm talking about to rapture the church, with such a fervency that they anticipated it every day. And then in time, some of the members either died accidentally or they died because of age. And whenever death came, and they had their services and memorials, the people got sad, believing their loved one was going to miss the rapture. So Paul writes 1 Thessalonians, which is actually 2 Thessalonians, because he'd already taught them about the rapture prior to. So we're seeing this as a second-time message to the church at Thessalonica. And he's saying, don't sorrow as others who have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus rose again, when he comes, he's going to bring those who died in Christ with him. And there's going to be this reunion in the air. That's another reason I believe in the pre-trib rapture. It brings the church age to a close, and you open a whole new dispensation of time. But when that happens, I believe that the 18th verse in 1 Thessalonians 4, he says, wherefore comfort one another with these words. So the thought of the rapture were to be words of comfort, whereas in our day it's alarm for a lot of people. But I think it's because sometimes we get our thinking upside down. So what I think is going to happen, I don't know, but I sure am excited. Well, I don't know how to think that. I've talked to them. When I went with Kufi over to Israel twice, and we were hosted by Orthodox Jews on both occasions. And the first trip I made was an orientation where we were in. I've been in one of the leading Orthodox spiritual leaders in Jerusalem. Was there for Shabbat on Friday night and with his family. And see how many preachers? We had 30 some in that group. And then when we went back, when the rockets were being fired on Gaza in August of 14, we had 55. There was a preacher from every state. And then there were a couple of evangelists who went, and then there were some other media personalities. So I know there were 55 preachers. But going back to being in the home and seeing what they do, and in these sessions, they were not blatant in presenting their view, but they did try to evangelize us. Because on the last night, to the young fellow we had for the whole tour, I took all I could handle. And I kept waiting on some of these preachers. Some of these preachers I knew. Some have major platforms. And what they were saying to us was, we want you to go back and have these Christians United for Israel meetings and invite the Jews in. And then they were going down a whole list of things for us not to do. And not to try to evangelize them, to offend them, and going through all this stuff. And so then one of the preachers, he was from Florida, Lakeland, Florida. Then he gave a testimony. And he said that back when the Passion for the Christ came out, and what's his name? Mel Gibson, when he had done it, that he was labeled as being anti-Semitic, and then alarm went throughout the whole Jewish camp, just like with Trump being labeled anti-Semitic because of a remark he made over the deal in Charlottesville. But anyway, he said that when the movie came out, he had some Orthodox friends who called him and said, we need to talk to you. And he said, one man drove 300 miles to talk to me and asked me what I thought. And he said, my friends, my Jewish friends know that they can talk to me and I will not try to win them to Christ. And I started twisting a little bit. And I looked around the room to see who else was in the room, because I'm the oldest guy in the whole camp. I mean, these other preachers were young. They were 30-ish, 40-ish, maybe a couple were 50-ish. And I'm waiting on somebody to say something. And I waited, and then I raised my hand. And he said, do you have a question? I said, no, but I got a comment. And he said, what's that? And I said, well, I need to clear the air. And I said, I made my first trip to Israel in 1977 before you were born. And I've been coming back ever since, and I love it. And I love Jewish people. And I'm more at home here, especially spiritually, than I am here. And I said, but I can't sit in this meeting and leave this meeting with giving the impression to my fellow pastors or the folks leading this that I would not share my faith with any man, especially a Jewish person whom I love. And I said, I couldn't do that. And I said, but you. I said, you have been trying to convert us since we got here. Because suddenly, you have cast some doubts about the resurrection of Jesus and some other things. But understand, I'm not offended. I said, I expect it. And I said, if my Jewish neighbors and friends didn't expect me to tell them about my Savior, then I would not be any example of a Christian believer. Oh, it got quiet. You know what was amazing? Nobody else said anything. That broke the meeting up. We get on the bus to leave. And, of course, you got the two doors, the front door, the back door, and I got on the back door where I'd been sitting, and I sat there. 6 or 8 of the preachers came by, leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Thank you. Thank you." So when it comes to where they are with their belief, the 144,000, I believe, are going to spur the evangelism that's going to go forth throughout the 12 tribes, throughout Israel and the world. And the gospel is going to be preached all over the world. And you got the 2 witnesses that will be executed in Jerusalem that aren't in, I don't believe that's into the 144,000 because we see them mentioned later. But I really don't know that we know yet what's going to be that tipping point. But I do believe it's out there. And it's interesting. We came back to have that meeting, and we had a meeting at the synagogue there on Kings Highway, and with the Orthodox, and they had the ultra-Orthodox and the liberal rabbi was there too. Said that for the first time in Myrtle Beach, they'd had all 3 in the room at the same time, and we had the meeting at Coastal in the auditorium there, and the ultra-Orthodox, he's got the the heavy beard and so forth. He's sitting there, and he looked at me and he said, "Why are you here?" And I said, I almost want to say, "Why are you here?" And I said, "I want to be." And I told him I'd been to Israel many times and had a love for his people and for him and so forth. And he said, "Well, I got a problem." And Stursky was there. What's his first name? Victor. Yeah, Victor. And so he was asking Victor, he said, now, and most of these T-shirt places are owned not just by Orthodox, but these ultra-Orthodox. They got their own synagogue there on Oak Street. And it's ultra. I mean, you see people walking on the keeping Sabbath day. And so he said, these Christians here in Myrtle Beach come by my people's businesses and leave tracts and Bibles and all these things, and it offends us. He said, and he went on, and I sat there a little bit, and I said, do I say anything or do I don't? And so I said, I better say something. And I looked at him, and I said, well, now listen, I may owe you an apology. There's a good chance that some of the tracts and maybe some of the Bibles that have ended up in some of your places of business could have been people from my church. I said, but they didn't leave them to offend you. They left them because we love you. Well, when I said that, the Orthodox rabbi fell out. He was laughing. I guess they kind of anticipated Orthodox, to feed that. But that laughter broke the meeting up, and they totally supported the meeting. But the fact that I said, I don't know who did it, but I can promise you, it could have been some of my people, but they did it because we love you. And it turned the tide. And we had 800 or so that came. It was we need another event like that. But anyway, so when we look at these signs, I do believe that it again, as the Daniel 9:24, the 70 weeks. It has to do with Israel, in my opinion. Number one, because Revelation 12, the church. I don't believe the church is here. I think we're raptured in Revelation 4. And so that sign, and to say it's for then, the fact that these things line up on the 23rd, and that's according to this software, and they're saying it has never happened before, won't happen again, but I don't know we can limit God to say there's something God could never do again. And so I just don't feel like that it's enough that we can just jump all over this thing and the biggest thing, and that would be for anyone watching by way of the web, are those that are here in the service. We got to love our families, we got to love people, and we got to live every day as if we could meet him today. You know, years ago I saw a bumper sticker, had a picture on it. And the reason I noticed it was kind of busy to have on a bumper sticker. The car was stopped, and I got out of mine and walked by, and I looked at it. But it had a picture of a man, and it showed him tying his shoes on one end of the picture, and on the other end of the picture, it showed a black hearse. And it said, "You may have tied your shoes this morning, but somebody else may untie them tonight." And that was the imminent death. We're not guaranteed life on any kind of schedule. Well, the same thing would be on the rapture. But for whatever reason, people get kind of all antsy about the rapture. And I think it's because so much going on. Now, let's change gears. I have talked through the break. We're going to run out of time if I don't. Let me take you somewhere quickly because of what is taking place. And look in Matthew 24 if you have your Bible. And I mentioned the 7 feast days. I don't know that I'll have time to do that. Let me go back to where I put it with Z's, so it'd be at the end. And where did it go? Here it is. I think I did that. I did that. No. I know it. It's because I'm trying to show you something. And it's just wanting to jump. Where in the world? That's hard to believe. I'll tell you what, let's just do this one. And it's an overlooked prophecy as well. And since we're going to be a little short on time, and next week we're going to do. I wanted to go to the birth pains, and I probably bogged down there. I mentioned some of this just a moment ago, and I had it on the screen. These are some pictures going to lead us to a prophecy that, for some of the newcomers, you probably have never heard it. I learned it from Bill Silas when he was here, and I had to confess my I was just naive about it. But this is a group that we flew over when the rockets were being fired on Gaza. And I mentioned some of the preachers there. Now, this is not the same group. There were a few in the group that was there when I was we were actually at the Orthodox, what do they call it, rabbinate? They got a whole settlement south of Bethlehem, and that's where we went and studied with them. And that's where we were that last night. But some of the folks there in this group is Mark Biltz, the Blood Moon book that Hagee, he wrote his book, but he got it from Mark Biltz. Mark was there. He's a Messianic believer, and he has a church in Washington, state of Washington, Seattle, I think. And then this fellow's name has just escaped me. He has got a huge church in California, and he's really active in the political arena. And you'll hear him interviewed occasionally, but he was there. We were at the Knesset, and this is some of the archives that are there. We met with the chief of staff for Netanyahu, and then we went down to Gaza. That's Gaza City in the background, and these are the Iron Dome. That's the system. It was a Patriot that we had, but the Israelis have modified it and put their software in it. And whenever a rocket is fired, within a matter of milliseconds, they know where the trajectory is going. If it's going to land out in the desert, they leave it alone. If it's going towards a populated area, they shoot it down. And these stations were operated by 3 Israeli IDF members. And you would have invited any one of the three home with you. You'd adopted them. The oldest was probably 20, 23, 24. And I mean, as pretty a girl as you've ever seen. But in Israel, the girls serve in the IDF. And they were manning these sites. And that's the shift that was on break. The commander was there, and then they had others. They had a mobile unit that there's always someone monitoring. So when those rockets are fired, I mean, within just a matter of just not even seconds, they identify it, know where it's going, and then they'll know to shoot it down. This is one of the soldiers. This is Sergeant Anthony. You see he's got his weapon on him, and this is the hotel we were in there in Jerusalem. And he had just left Gaza. He had been on an extended duty. You might wonder, well, why would he have his weapon on in the hotel? Anytime he's in uniform, he's got to have his weapon. And most of the time out of uniform, they'll have their weapon. But it's just a regulation they have to comply with. Sometimes I've taken people over and they see it and they get real nervous. Listen. That's your protection. I'd be nervous if it went over and there wasn't any. But he was sharing with us, giving us updates on that was taking place in Gaza. And then we went to Mount Herzl. This is a cemetery. Three of the IDF, they had tunneled, Palestinians had, Hamas had tunneled, got under the fence, and got into not the town but the outskirts. And an IDF member, and it was a she. She was overlooking this. There's a bit of a barrier between the fence and what would be considered the city, and they do that. They keep an open area, and she saw something and wasn't supposed to be there, and began to look, sound an alarm, and a squad had come over, and they had planned and had weaponry. They had the bomb devices to blow themselves up and to kill as many Israelis as they could. And they intervened. They arrested. They caught two. And there were three Israelis who they had the one that they had in custody, and he had on a suicide vest, and he committed suicide and killed those three IDF members. And then one who was in hiding grabbed a body part of the commander and began running towards the tunnels and got in the tunnel. But one of the IDF members broke all the rules, and he followed him, ran him down in the tunnel, and retrieved a body part. But they had, during all that commotion, they had another part of the captain's body taken into Gaza, and they were holding it for ransom. And this is where they were buried. All the body of the soldier that was taken a part of. They think maybe a leg. We're not sure. But this is what they're doing. And we were there with members of the Knesset and a memorial service with them, and it was moving. I mean, when you see the pictures, they got a picture on every gravestone of the soldiers, and that goes back for all their wars. And you see the age. And I'm sure it's true of our guys that have been in Afghanistan and other places. But it's moving. And I realize the price they pay. Now I want you to notice in Jeremiah 49, verse 34. This is a prophecy that we have to keep in mind. And you heard the president today. If he didn't identify the real source, the main source of terrorism in the Middle East today, and didn't pull a punch, he talks about this word Elam, and that's Iran. And Bill Silas pointed it out. Now here's what's interesting as we look at future. Verse 34 of Jeremiah 49 says, the word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet against Elam in the beginning of the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah, saying. Now, when you see the word came to the prophet Jeremiah, and we know it's against Elam, that's Iran. I mean, you just put Iran right there in your mind. And then verse 35, thus saith the Lord of hosts, behold, I will break the bow of Elam, the chief of their might. Verse 36, and upon Elam will I bring the four winds from the four quarters of heaven, and will scatter them toward all those winds, and there shall be no more nation, whether the outcast of Elam shall not come. And then look in 37. For I will cause Elam to be dismayed before their enemies, and before them that seek their life. And I will bring upon them even my fierce anger, saith the Lord. And I will send the sword after them till I have consumed them. And then verse 38. And I will set my throne in Elam, and will destroy from thence the king and the princes, saith the Lord. Now what did he say? Did he not just say, I'm going to set a throne in Elam? Interesting, isn't it? If I were Iranian, I'd want to read this book. And then I would want to move. There are two things going to happen. And some are talking about this now, this week, in some of the prophecy stuff. And I really don't know enough about it to know where they're getting it, other than that there's some who saying, you see in Jeremiah 17, Damascus will be destroyed. And Israel will destroy Damascus. And Israel will destroy Elam. So that's two future events that have never occurred. Number one, with Damascus, Damascus is the oldest continual city. There's no record it's ever been destroyed. Jerusalem about 13 times, but not Elam. Damascus. Now in verse 39, look at this now. Look at this. But it shall come to pass in the what day? Latter days, that I will bring against the captivity of Elam, saith the Lord. So now we got a mile marker. You remember I talked about the connection points? So when's this going to happen? It's going to happen in the latter days. And then if you look with me in Ezekiel 32 and verse 24, because we have another prophet that's speaking, and we're reading this in Ezekiel 32:24. Notice, there is Elam and all her multitude round about her grave, all of them slain, fallen by the sword, which are gone down uncircumcised into the nether parts of the earth, which caused their terror in the land of the living, yet they have borne their shame with them that go down to the pit. So here is another judgment prophesied. And then when you see uncircumcised, they've gone down uncircumcised, that's not a reference to a physical circumcision as it is a salvation circumcision. See, we have a new life, a new heart. And then there's a lot of stuff happening. You'll see the countries that are surrounding this tract of land and their involvement. You can't read that until we can get better computing. The Levant, that's an area where we can you see Syria, and that's where all this stuff is going on. And then we're going to look up in a moment to check on the Iranians, but that's pictured there. And then this last slide, here's Iran, here's Elam. You see this tract of land right here? You know what that is? Right there. We'll do it on this. This is a little better view. That right there. That's where the Iranian nuclear facility is. It's in the heart of what was Elam. And if you do, you can do a word search on Elam with anything you see. It's all over the Old Testament. I don't know why no one ever pointed it out to me. Yes, Joe?
movement that is going on as we speak to overthrow
There's been a good bit of I call it noise. Well, noise is it could be yay, it could be nay. The reason that's difficult is that it doesn't matter whether you're in Saudi Arabia or if you're in Jordan. Mubarak had it in place in Egypt, and then he got a little soft on the enforcement. You got Hussein still in Syria. Who's in Syria? Assad, yes. Hussein has already met his maker, yeah. But no, he's still in power. They get their Hitler, for example, had his security force, and they have their security forces. And the difference between what would happen in Saudi Arabia or what would happen in other parts of the Middle East and what happens here, if there is any hint or sign that there's going to be any kind of revolution, they're going to kill them.
Yeah, there's Sunnis in Saudi Arabia, correct? Shiites in Iran?
Shiites primarily are based in Iran. But that I don't know that would have any real relevance to anything other than the fact that it may have some movement toward or away from Israel. And right now things are moving toward Israel. And if there's a revolt going on, if there's unhappiness in Iran or in Saudi Arabia, it could be in both camps because any peace gestures made toward Israel.
I was just thinking it could maybe even be a bigger movement than that, maybe even tie in with the agenda.
Say that again.
Well, the movie.
Right.
There's some big people behind what's going on with the agenda.
I don't know that they could be bigger than what you have in any either kingdom or dictatorship with whoever's running it. I believe there would be more. The probability would be an assassination more so than civil war. Because see, civil war could not remove Assad. I mean, look at the devastation wrought upon that country. He's still there. And these kings have got people around them that they own them. And so I don't know. I don't know enough of the politics in Saudi Arabia as to how you could mount that kind of insurrection, unless it's a family thing. That could do it. And then too, I don't know how it's going to really affect an outcome other than oil prices. I mean, so beyond that, worldwide, I don't know.
I had to get in here because I was hungry.
Yeah. But it would depend on how they're connected. The thing that troubles me more than what would be happening anywhere else in the Middle East is what's happening in Washington. And there is a movement in the State Department against Trump's position on Israel. And there's some pretty prominent people on the wrong side of the equation. And it's pretty typical. It's not new to the presidency or to the office, because you have these brain trust people who sit around and solve the problems, and too often it comes down on Israel. Well, if Israel would just leave these terrorists alone and let them kill them and take down the wall and just let them just pour in, then we could have peace in the Middle East. And they want to label Israel, and there's more noise on that. I've not heard what you just shared about Saudi Arabia, though I think isn't the king's health? He's 80-something, I think. And some thought he had dementia before he became, because the predecessor after he died. I think this man's health isn't the best. So if I heard he had passed, it wouldn't surprise me. because it could either be natural causes or the unnatural cause. But yes, sir. Oh, yeah, it has. It has. Oh, that would be the jewel. Now, that would be the jewel. If they could, see, with their oil, and if they could in any way, that same kind of ambition that Saddam Hussein had, and he goes into Kuwait first, but he wanted to become the man of the Middle East, and but I don't think that it could happen based on Bush's speech today. Trump, yeah, I don't think you knew him yet. It's been a long day, but I don't believe that with Saudi Arabia being the ally that they are, and then by no stretch of the imagination, they are not milk carton good people. But we learned some things. We took out Saddam Hussein, and that part of the world went all to pieces. We took out Gaddafi and blew the Middle East up and set an opportunity for the rise of ISIS and all these other terror groups. And by no stretch of the imagination were either of these men going to win any kind of awards and anything that would be civil. But what they did do, they were a stabilizing force. Mubarak was doing the same thing in Egypt, and in the short-sightedness of our State Department. They encouraged the overthrow of Mubarak and put in that Muslim Brotherhood guy, who I think they're about to execute because of the people that he killed after he got over Egypt. And now Sisi seems to be, he was a military guy, seems to have fairly level head, but all of them have their prejudices. But if we just kind of recap for a moment, we can see some things, and we've not by any stretch of the imagination covered all of them. We have doing work today in Ezekiel 38 and 9, and the coming war there. I tell you what, we got more stuff happening today than if you combine World War I, World War II, you can almost combine all the wars that we've been involved in and package them, and they would pale in comparison to what's out there now. With this major difference, we are facing an age that is just loaded with nuclear bombs. And some of them are certifiable insane, such as North Korea. And Pakistan right now is pretty stable, but they got nukes, and they could have a movement. You got Turkey with a little Hitler in Turkey. I mean, Erdogan, he wants to be the man, and he's bullish. He come over here and he turns his security team loose in Washington to beat up a crowd of people, and they convicted 2 or 3 of them. We've never been as unstable. David Jeremiah did one, and I don't have the video. I saw part of it that is really centered around September dates and these things, and he did a prelude to his program, showing all the extreme activity that's taking place in various parts of the world. And then the big question, what next? You see, we don't have just one front to guard. And with missiles, even though North Korea is ways off, they're pretty confident he's got the means to hit the West Coast. He might not know where in the West Coast it's going to hit. But what he's got to shoot with, that last one was a hydrogen bomb. Now, hydrogen is more powerful, and it's more miniaturized. It's a smaller warhead than the atomic bomb, and he's got it. So We could see we got hurricanes on the coast. We got earthquakes around the world. But we got one promise. He's coming soon. I believe he's coming. And it would be a good day to fly. And so to encourage people and to get the word out, I appreciate your attentiveness. I have really fallen short on getting things as promoted as we should. Yes, Charles.
I don't know if everybody here knows it or not, but the United States has got a lot more than we know about. And me being military, some of the things that I saw, and I retired in 1980, we were capable then of, if a missile's coming in, whether it's coming out of the sky, from a ship, or wherever it's coming from, we have the capability of shooting it down before it gets to the United States.
The only problem, it was, and you had come out of the Cold War, and we did have ICBMs.
They can't sneak in the back.
Whoa, Charles, you don't understand something. They destroyed them.
Oh, it's gonna happen.
No, they destroyed them. We did. We don't have the anti-ballistic missiles in the silos that we used to have.
Oh no.
That's gone.
Some of them rotted away.
Well, no, we destroyed them. No, we destroyed them in some of this negotiating that we did. We're after the Clinton administration, Iron Curtain came down. We said we have no more needs for nukes. It's kind of like smallpox. Everybody had a vaccination for a while.
Yeah, I had one last year.
And now they're telling us even the ones we had aren't any good, but smallpox is still a potential. And so, like, some things go away, some things come back. The difference is that back in the Cold War, it was us and Russia, and we could stare each other down. And then wait, do I want to do this? It's going to cost me too much. Now we got some crazy people with bombs. And so you don't have a comparative equation at all. And it's not will they, it's when they have opportunity. And so we have improved our defensive stuff. And I think we got a laser. I was reading an article the other day and we may even have some in space. But, that would be totally experimental, I'm assuming. I don't know how they've ever used them to exercise them. But the president did say that next 4th of July, that he is going to put on an armed forces demonstration of our power. We ought to have been doing it every 4th of July because strength keeps us safe. And that would get us respect around the world. We just must pray that Pence, there's some good people that's got to live. And the enemy would do his best to take it out. And that's when you see, if you watch your agenda and you realize, you just do it on the internet. Just go and put socialist in Washington and see how many of our legislators admit to being a socialist. And we know who Bernie Sanders was. And to think he couldn't, it's already happened. That's what they're saying in that video. That's in place. Trump's just interrupted it. And so to hold that back is where we must pray and trust God to give us one more opportunity to see the world hear the gospel and be saved. Isn't it an exciting time to live? If I were a lost man, I don't know. I'd hide in the rock, I guess. Yeah, we got it. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for the class time tonight. We didn't get all done I had hoped to do. But Lord, I do pray that we did please you. We want to lift you up and give glory to your name and to praise you with our whole heart. And Father, we pray that you'd bless the church. We pray that as we continue our study in waging spiritual warfare, that you would bless it. We just pray that the lives would change and hearts would be tender in your hand, and souls, Lord, we pray, will be saved. In Christ's name, amen. Okay, bless you. Bless you.